Hello and welcome back to Shoogly Shed Motors. Let's do a little bit more work on the CB250RS. Last episode, obviously, we got the rolling chassis together and the engine into the frame, so the bike's taking shape and I'm really liking it. Now it's a case of kind of bolting on bits and pieces. I've got sort of the back kind of mudguard bits to go on. I've got a headlight brackets, indicators, things like that. So starting to bolt all these components together with a view of thinking about like wiring the bike at some point, and then also needing to kind of get like a fuel system together with a carburetor, etc. And then we'll think about paint. But for the time being, let's just keep bolting things on and kind of try and build the bike outwards. Now, because this is obviously a bit more of a budget build, I've just bought these pre-made off-the-shelf headlight brackets. Obviously they're not as exciting as doing my own, but they are a lot less time and effort than fabricating them from scratch. So I think for this build and the purposes here, they're pretty much perfect. So all I'm doing is getting them roughly in the right position, not tightening anything just yet. I'll get the other side on as well, get the headlight in the middle, bolt the headlight to it, figure out my angles and then tighten all the bolts. If you tighten one thing, it starts to pull everything a bit out of whack. And especially because there's so many bolts holding these things together, I'd rather get it right first time. When you buy aftermarket or universal motorcycle parts, you kind of have to accept the fact that they'll take some modification, or as I like to say, jiggery pokery, to make them work for your application. It's just kind of par for the course with cheap parts online, really. There's a reason they're cheap, is they don't really fit everything, therefore you have to make them fit. The tape I'm using here is called self-amalgamating tape. I think it's intended for electricians as a sort of waterproof electrical tape, I think. But effectively it's a sort of rubberized tape and it sticks really well to itself and creates a sort of solid rubber kind of bond almost. And the reason I'm using it here, firstly, is to widen the fork stanchions so these clamps fit them, but then secondly also as a vibration reduction method. A lot of stock headlights are mounted on rubber mounts because obviously motorbikes vibrate, and if your headlight's vibrating it can throw the beam pattern all over the road, which isn't ideal for you or other motorists. So yeah, although like I say, I'm having to do this to make them fit, it also does have a bit of practicality about it as well. So I'm going for this standard 7-inch headlight, which will go on either side of this. I think I said right back at the start I was wanting to keep some of that kind of 80s styling, which, you know, is quite iconic on this bike. Therefore I'm going for normal indicators, not tiny little micro ones like I put on a lot of other builds. I just think these will suit this bike quite nicely. Add a little bit of 80s chunk. Well, that's pretty much all I can do just now. I'm waiting on some parts coming, things like levers and grips and other little finishing parts. But that's a lot of stuff bolted onto the bike now, kind of getting it ready for jobs like the wiring, which obviously I need to have all the electrical components in position before I can do that. But yeah, closing in on some of the finishing jobs. Two more kind of obvious big jobs that I've got to do are the rebuild of the front brake master cylinder, the caliper. Front brake caliper needs rebuilt and refurbished, and the carburetor. And the carb needs basically stripped down, cleaned and rebuilt. So I'll probably do 2 separate episodes, one on the carburetor and one on the brake caliper. So those will probably be coming up soon. And then also, obviously, the other big job is things like the paint and recovering the seat. But we're getting, you know, pretty close to the sort of finish line on this build. Without hopefully too much more work, we'll get the bike running. Once the carb's been rebuilt, we can go for a test start. Obviously, once I've done a bit of wiring as well, I can go for a test start and see how the bike's running. But yeah, I'm starting to feel quite positive about this build, and hopefully all that work we did to the engine has been, you know, worth it, and it'll run nicely. Fingers crossed. Apologies for maybe some slight kind of changes in some of the camera settings. I don't know if the white balance went a bit crazy at times. I basically had a total disaster where I knocked my tripod and the camera fell over and I smashed my camera, which was suboptimal. So I had to go and buy a new camera to continue filming these videos, which was unexpected and a bit annoying because kind of blew quite a bit of budget getting that camera. Probably a good time to remind you then of my Patreon and my Redbubble account. Patreon is just there if you want to support me financially, and Redbubble is there if you want to get some Shoogly Shed merch, which also supports me in a little bit financially too. So thank you for anyone who has, you know, joined the Patreon or purchased anything from my Redbubble shop. It does actually go a long way to helping me here, especially when I go and break an expensive camera. Anyway, as usual, please do give me a like, leave me a comment, and make sure you subscribe to the Shoogly Shed channel. I will hopefully see you next time. Take care. Goodbye.